I'm Chris Dailey, founder of the Sports Court, and I had the pleasure of being part of the 2021 NFL Hall of Fame Media Days, where I interviewed the likes of Carmichael, Drew Pearson, and Jimbo Covert. Following this clip is a compilation of all the interviews I did with all these NFL legends. Congratulations, and after walking on to Southern University, you became a star receiver, and one of your teammates at the time was an all-time great NFL defensive back, Mel Blount. So what were those practices like with Mel pushing you to the limits, and what did you learn from that time with him?
Oh, wow. I always make a joke about it, which Mel was one of the greatest guys in college for me and still is right now. But I went to school with Mel Blount's first cousin. Her name was Brenda Blount, and from first grade all the way to 12th grade, I loved her. But she didn't want to have anything to do with me. So when I got to Southern and Mel, going against Mel every day, and with the other other wide receivers, when they would catch a pass on Blount, Mel, he was just like two-hand touched him. But when I caught a pass on him, he would clothesline me, forearm me. And then one day I just said, "Did Brenda ever say anything to me about me? Because you're really so tough on me. Why aren't you tough on these other guys?" He just laughed and was joking about it. But one of the greatest guys I ever played college ball with, one of the greatest guys I went against in the National Football League, a guy that I say prepared me for the NFL. He took me under his wing a little bit. Sometimes when we were on campus and we didn't have enough money, or the places where you go get a sandwich were closed, and Mel would say, come over to the house, come get you something to eat. And he took care of us like that. But, a great guy. I mean, if you ever talk to him and see what the work that he's doing in Pittsburgh now, he's still an unbelievable person. A lot of respect for him.
Coach, congratulations on being inducted into the Hall of Fame. And to stay on topic with that 1980 season when you led the Raiders to a Super Bowl win over the Philadelphia Eagles, being the first wild card team to ever win a Super Bowl, just what set that team apart from all your other teams? Because you touched base about how it was a really old team, a lot of guys that you were unsure about. So what set that team apart?
Well, we had a lot of grit. That team. There was a lot of scars and scabs on everybody's bodies and minds because we had all bounced around a little bit, and we've been at the bottom of the pile and resurrected ourselves. And it was my second year as a head coach, and we were struggling. We were struggling very hard, but I knew we had to do something. Mr. Al Davis knew that he was not very happy, and you had to know him when he wasn't very happy. That wasn't a good feeling. So, but I said, we can't. We're not doing anything wrong. The worst thing you can do when things are going badly is change everything, because you're not geared to change everything. You got to do what you believe in, what your players believe in, and so we just have to do it better. And we had to practice better and concentrate and get rid of the rest of. So we kind of went into our own shell and just did what we had to do. And little by little, we won here, won there, and all of a sudden we're in the playoffs. And once you get in the playoffs, I always told players, once you're in the playoffs, anything can happen. Anything. And anything happened that year. And we were able to win as a wild card, as the extra game on the road, and did it with style and class and dignity.
Thanks, Coach. Alex Fleming, and then Rick Watson.
Coach Flores, first and foremost.
From one New Jersey kid to the next, congratulations on getting inducted to Hall of Fame. And I loved when you talk about Joe Theismann, because I'm a big Notre Dame fan, and Heisman, as he called him. So you mentioned going to Tulsa and getting recruited as a quarterback, and you eventually switched to a wide receiver. So can you talk about that transition, becoming a wide receiver, and then going undrafted, and your mentality coming into the first Cowboys camp as an undrafted guy just trying to make a mark?
All right. Well, good questions as well. You guys are mid-season corn with these questions, man. I'm telling you. Anyway, yeah, I went from South River, New Jersey to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I chose Tulsa over the University of Nebraska. And they both were recruiting me as a quarterback. But my favorite sport growing up and all through high school, I played all three of the major sports, but my favorite sport was baseball. You know, I was all state my senior year. My junior year, I batted .444. I was a center fielder. I talk about Joey and I playing football together. We played baseball together. He was the shortstop. I played second base. In basketball, we were the backcourt. We called him the black hole because once we passed him the ball, we never saw it again unless we were getting it on a rebound, something like that. But baseball was my favorite sport, so I ended up choosing Tulsa over Nebraska because Tulsa had a great baseball program, and they were going to allow me to do both. And Tulsa's baseball program was going to College World Series every year. They were had players getting drafted into the majors,
Not down here.
including the great Steve Rogers. I don't know if a lot of people remember him, who pitched with Montreal, all-star pitcher. So that enticed me more than anything else because coming out of high school, I was 5'11", 145 pounds. You know, so, you know, I didn't know if I could handle college football at that level, at that weight. But anyway, once I got to Tulsa, I started on the freshman team at quarterback. I beat out 5 other guys. There were 6 quarterbacks they brought in. 3 of them ended up on defense, and I beat out the other 3, and they made me captain. I quarterback 2-2 season. At the end of that season, the coach comes to me and says, Drew, you got a chance to start at quarterback on the varsity next year if you make the commitment. So I made the commitment, gave up baseball for football, was a backup quarterback for most of the season to a senior. Late in the season, in the final 4 games, I got the start. We finished, I think, 2-2. But after that season, now that I committed to football, I asked the coach, Claude Gibson, if I could move to wide receiver because now I knew I wasn't going to be a pro quarterback. I just didn't have the skills to be a professional quarterback. But I knew I had some ability to maybe be a professional wide receiver. So my junior and senior year, they moved me. I played wide receiver. My junior year, I caught 22 passes. My senior year, I caught 33 passes. It got quite lonely out there at wide receiver. And it was a little shock, too, because at quarterback, you're on every play. You know, you're touching the ball on every play. Here at wide receiver, hopefully you can touch it 3 or 4 times, and hopefully more a game. But it's all dependent on someone else. So it's a little different out there playing wide receiver. But I knew if I was going to play football, that would be my natural position. Now, going to the Cowboys as an undrafted free agent, you know, things were a lot different back then. I was one of maybe 80-some free agents, you know, along with the 17 draft picks they had that year. We had a full 2 weeks of two-a-days with Coach Landry out there in Thousand Oaks with just rookies, and he tried to kill us. And what he was trying to do was get people to quit, and he got half of those guys to quit by the end of that week, and he wanted to see who could handle it. Because once the veterans came in, man, things started happening. Things started popping. And he wanted to see who was tough enough to take it to the next level once the veterans got there and continued to improve to hopefully make the team. But I just kept doing things, kept getting opportunities in practice, kept getting opportunities in exhibition games, whether returning a punt 59 yards in my first preseason game against the Rams in the Coliseum, whether it's coming back to Texas Stadium in my first game at Texas Stadium and taking the second half kickoff after Coach Landry says we need a spark. As we left the locker room, I take the second half kickoff and take it 53 yards down the sideline. We take it in for a touchdown from there. I remember playing in the Astrodome. I'm sitting on the bench for 3 quarters. This is the last preseason game of the year. I think I'm going to get cut because I haven't played yet. They finally put me in there. Craig Mortman calls me on wing short divide, wing post, and I ran the post, and he threw a beautiful pass, and I just stuck my hand out there, and it hit my hand and stayed there, and I brought it in. But so I just kept making plays to live another day with the Cowboys. And then when it came time for the final cut, I don't know if everybody knows this, but the Cowboys put me on waivers. They put me on waivers, and the Chicago Bears claimed me. And the Cowboys had 24 hours to reclaim me. And Chris, thank goodness, they reclaimed me. Okay. And that made a difference in my career, because if I go to the Chicago Bears, I'm probably playing with, all due respect, they're pro guys, Bobby Douglas or Bob Avellini or somebody like that instead of Roger Staubach and Danny White. So that's the story of how I got through the Cowboys. It was a rigorous training camp. We actually had 6 wide receivers make it that year. My receiver coach was his first year in coaching, Mike Ditka, who knew nothing about wide receiver position, running wide receiver routes. The blessing for me is that the Cowboys had made a trade that summer to bring Otto Stowe to the Cowboys, who had been playing behind Paul Warfield for a couple years in Miami. And they traded Ron Sellers to the Dolphins. That's why 88 was available when I made the team and I could select the number. But Otto Stowe is the one that taught me how to run pass routes in the NFL. And he didn't tell Drew, this is how you do it, this and that. No, I got in his back pocket. I simulated him. He ran that out route, I ran it the same way. He ran the in route, I ran it the same way. You know why? Because he learned it from Paul Warfield. He's running running routes the same way Paul Warfield ran it. How do I know that? Because I studied Paul Warfield. I watched Paul Warfield run his routes. So anyway, that's how I learned the wide receiver position. Then the 10th game of my rookie year, Otto Stone and Mike Montgomery, 2 guys ahead of me, got hurt in consecutive weeks. I start my 10th game against Philadelphia Eagles. Coach Landry throws me 1 pass. It's a sideline pass. I catch it for about 12 yards. And then we play on Thanksgiving Day against Miami Dolphins. And now he's going to unleash me. I end up catching 8 passes for 80-some yards, all over the middle, all tough catches on the 84 route. And then I started having opportunities from then on out. But once I got in as a starter, that was it. Otto Stowe couldn't recover from the ankle injury he had. Mike Montgomery, the same thing. So once I got the job, it was mine to keep.
Thank you. And I also love your work in the XFL, by the way.
You remember those days?
Yeah, it's coming back too. So hopefully that can hopefully the third time's a charm.
Well, if they do it right, they could have a good opportunity. Because I tell you, Chris, there's enough players out there to support a secondary league. You know, they don't have to be worried about matching the NFL. Just do their own thing and develop their own way. I think over time they could become successful. Good stuff, 100%. Chris. Will I see you in Canton?
I'm not going to Canton. I wish I was, but it was great talking to you.
Thanks, Chris. Running
TV.
Congratulations on becoming a Hall of Famer. And when you were my age, 15 years old, you experienced your first seizure on Christmas Eve. Can you describe the moment you had your first seizure and then the eventual diagnosis of epilepsy and that whole time period in your life when you were unsure whether you could play professional football?
Yeah, so I had a seizure. Did not know it was a seizure. Christmas Eve, my freshman year in high school, and I was out at my great grandmother's house for a big family Christmas, and it really was like a nightmare. I kind of wandered around the house crying and just really upset, and had a couple of them, and it really was kind of like a nightmare. You know, wake up, adults and parents are kind of concerned for what in the world was going on in the middle of the night. And I'm just, man, it's Christmas morning. Let's go. You know, it's time to go. You know, everything was fine. And then I had another one and another. And by that time, my mom had already had the doctor's visits already set up. So, but it did. It took a couple months to go through all the tests and figure out everything and to finally get the diagnosis. And it was kind of wasn't a dark time, but it was definitely a weird time of not knowing. This is all pre-internet, so there's no way to find out information near as easy as we have it today. So, you know, when I finally got my diagnosis and got to go visit with the doctor, and we had list of questions, of just general questions of daily activities and daily things until we got to the football part and the sports aspect. But in particular, football, because, you know, we're putting on helmets and we're running around and tackling and hitting each other with our heads. So that was on the top of my list. And he came out and said it so fast that I could keep playing. I had to ask him again. I was like, Doc, you know what football is, right? And he shook his head. I know what it is, and you keep playing and chasing your dream. And I took that and ran.
Congratulations, Isaac. And before your days of working it up in the NFL and at Memphis, you played junior college football. So when you're at JUCO in Los Angeles, did you ever think you'll make it to the NFL level, yet alone become a Hall of Famer? And what was your mental mindset like during that time?
Great question, man. Yes, I had an unconventional journey from high school to college. I always believe in the importance of staying goal-oriented and keeping your eyes on the prize. Although my journey was not the journey that I chose initially, but I was able to midstream adjust, is what I call it, and really keep my eyes on the end result, as opposed to just my eyes set on those wilderness moments that we have. And from there, I felt like it enabled me, and also brought people into my life once again to push me through that moment. I remember the very day that I was the recruiting process with the University of Memphis began. Coach Randy Fietner recruited me to Memphis. They had a great football schedule, but just ultimately through the junior college process, which is a process that as a high school senior you kind of frown upon it initially, but I think that journey really did a lot for me as far as developing me. It definitely did a lot for me as far as money management, I'll tell you that. And, kind of propelled me into becoming a Memphis Tiger.
Dominant football players of all time on one of the most dominant teams of all time. And now you're a dominant businessman. So what did the game of football teach you about what's yet to come in your future post-NFL career with your career in business?
What a great question, Chris. You know what? I think a lot of the things that you learn in sports, hard work and dedication, and leadership, and a lot of things that you learn are very transferable skills. And, I tried to look at the work ethic and leadership and things that I learned as playing professional sports and try to translate that to the business world. And I've been, really fortunate to be successful doing that. And I just think that, those are not cliches. I mean, those words are, you got to kind of live by them. And when you can do that, and you can show people, those types of skills, then, they're, again, very transferable, and you can be successful in the business world. So, that's what I've tried to do, and it's worked for me, and I think it works for a lot of guys that play in the NFL.
One of the main reasons as to why the NFL is the NFL today, and one of the things he did was expand the NFL, not just in America, but overseas. And I heard you mention NFL Europe. So it's still an option the NFL is exploring. Obviously, the league's still not there, but there's always games in London and now in Mexico and all these other countries. I have two questions for you. One, do you think there's one day going to be an NFL team based outside of America in a foreign country? And two, what was your biggest challenge while starting NFL Europe and trying to expand the game overseas?
Well, I guess you would have to say that globalization was once the order of the day and is now being questioned in some places. But I think that whether it's the NFL directly or an NFL affiliated league, expansion of our form of football overseas is inevitable. I say it's inevitable, but it takes a lot of work, which goes to the second part of your question. What were the biggest challenges? The biggest challenges we faced were that there were pockets of people in Europe who knew our sport and indeed had played our sport. Some of those who knew the sport knew it because of the Armed Forces Network and college football. Others knew it because of club football, and some had gone to college in the U.S. Some of the German players had come to the U.S. as track and field athletes. So the biggest challenge is going into a part of the world where there's some people who know the sport and have played the sport, but in other areas, contiguous areas, there's not any serious familiarity with the sport. So getting a cohesive group of cities together was really a difficult thing. So in London and pretty quickly in Germany, we had people who knew the game. In Spain and elsewhere, we were much further behind the learning curve. And I think that was the challenge. Ultimately, the league worked best when we had teams in Frankfurt and Hamburg and Cologne, but that was a relatively small league, Berlin. And I think that continues to be a challenge. You see, it's a challenge for European soccer in the United States, is to get some level of energy and understanding that's relatively uniform so that you can have a league with a representative number of teams that covers a pretty broad geographic area.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for all you've done for the game of football.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Congratulations on making the Hall of Fame and being the 335th person inducted into the Hall. And speaking of those numbers, you got the iconic knock from David Baker at 335. So can you just describe your emotions after getting that knock, and when did you realize the correlation between the number 335?
You know, my daughter actually pointed it out. There's a video that my wife had taken of kind of a time-lapse video of that hour and a half or hour and 35 minutes or whatever it was of me pacing in the room, waiting for something, either a knock or another phone call, just to kind of get the anxiety over with. And that, if you can kind of see that somewhere online. I don't know how it ended up online, but it shows you the raw emotion. It was just a culmination of everything. It's kind of funny. As soon as that door knocked, my door was knocked on. It just seems like you see in the movies, like every memory you've had from when you were a kid in high school and college, and even playing the Pop Warner football and all through the league and all the guys you'd play with. It just in an instant just kind of took you back through that wormhole and realized how far I'd come and everything I'd done along the way, and for it to end, and it was just a kind of a calming, overall satisfactory, like, exhale feeling where I could be like, you know what, I did it. I can close the book on my professional career, my football life. That's what I started out to do. I wanted to be the best, and when you get that knock, it kind of confirms it. So it's kind of hard to put into words, but it's definitely a feeling I'll never forget. And then there was a second part to your question. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, well, you kind of covered it with your daughter saying that, but the correlation when you realized the 335 when you got the knock and the number.
Yeah. So afterwards, we were on the bus on the way to the honor show, and my daughter had pointed out, because I think she had taken a video or something. She took a picture right when the door was me opening the door or something, and it ended up being 3:35 p.m. was the time that I kind of opened the door, and that's my induction number, is number 335. So I thought that was kind of ironic, symbolic, however you want to call it.
Vernon, and then.
Oh my gosh, that's a.
Hey Cliff, firstly, just a lot of respect for you from going to a small school all the way to the Hall of Fame. And my question for you is, your father was a war hero and a football player as well, and he really means a lot to you. So what does your father mean to you, and what did he teach you about the game and about just life as a whole?
Well, oh my gosh, my dad, was a fighter pilot. He was shot down in the South Pacific and was on a raft for 2 days and survived. So he was a tough guy. And he taught me, as I mentioned earlier, he taught me how to hit through guys and to aim like they do in karate. You aim for the other side. And so I knew how to hit guys early, and I think that's just an instinct thing. But he was also an example for me, because he had diabetes. He lost his vision, and it never bothered him, and it you never saw that he ever felt sorry for himself. And so there was an edge about mental toughness that when I see him give himself a shot in the morning, that's why I'm on the board of Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. When I see him give a shot of insulin to himself in the morning, I'm saying, man, that's a tough guy. And you've got to be not only tough physically, you've got to be tough mentally in pro football. And I think that I learned from him mental toughness. That's one thing that I think that was something and the toughness of not being afraid or intimidated by large crowds, and going out, because I played at Ouachita Baptist. We didn't have 2,000 people to come to a game. Then I go in to play in San Diego Stadium. They had 80,000. The first time I was in there. So I mean, that's a mental toughness that you have to learn over time, that helped you. Every little bit of mental toughness you can develop about the stadium, the injury, the overcoming the quarterback, winning, competing against them, and making sure that you can do everything that you can possibly do to study. I was a real student of the game and studied a whole lot. Coach Landry put out enormous amounts, big data sheets, and I was a real student of the game and really understood anticipated what the other team, the other quarterback was going to do. So, it came from my dad. He taught me how that discipline brought me discipline, and I was real fortunate guy.
Cavoli.
Hey, Donnie. So a lot of NFL greats all have a play that really defines their career and it's like the highlight of their career. And for you, it was that hit on Earl Campbell. It was probably so hard it could be heard from China. So where does this play rank amongst your all-time NFL moments? And I'm just curious as to what were your teammates' reaction on the sidelines after that hit?
It ranks number one, but closely behind is the 3 interceptions I had against Brian Sipe in one game versus Cleveland. But that play, it propelled us into the AFC Championship. I think Earl Campbell had 80 yards at halftime. I looked around Joe Green knows. I said, if he keeps running like that, we're not going to advance in the playoffs. So my teammates were very excited about that play because it kind of knocked him out of the game, and we were able to secure the win for the AFC Championship.
Hey, Edge, congratulations on being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and you talked about Jim Irsay and what he means to you, and despite not being on the Super Bowl team at the time, he's still sending over a Super Bowl ring. So what was your initial reaction when you got that ring, and just what does the Colts organization mean to you?
Well, the reaction when you get the ring, I'm really easy going and pretty easy to get, but it's you respect it, you respect it and you appreciate it because, they don't have to do something like that. And for me, I was still part of that team. It's just business is business. And once you understand the business, you'll go about your business a certain way. And I've always went about my business in a business manner, and as far as the Colts organization, that's home. That's home base. That's the one that brought me in. And to this day, we're family. I'm so comfortable with that organization.